Russia, the world's #2 superpower and owner of vast amounts of Soviet military equipment and experience, has invaded its much smaller neighbor Ukraine. Now, most people thought this war would be a foregone conclusion, but we're 1.5 months in and the Russians are retreating from the capital, Kyiv. What has happened? What has gone wrong? Well, we're going to take a look at some of the key events in the timeline and the strategies and tactics that have turned this war. So I'm here with my man Andrew Penman from Down Under. Now, we've both been intensely watching this war and following the war in Ukraine with Russia.
Absolutely.
I know you've been watching it from Down Under, Andrew.
Yep, we're getting all the live stuff. It's pretty intense what's going on. Absolutely.
So, I mean, let's go back. We're going to cover the war. Let's talk about what was happening in the 23rd. I mean, back then, the Russian foreign minister, he was almost stating that there would be no war. A lot of people didn't think this would happen, you know. I've got some friends in Russia. I talked to them a lot, and they didn't think it was going to happen. Even a lot of the Russians didn't think it was going to happen. But I heard a lot of these American and British intelligence reports, and you've got to figure that after, you know, the Cold War, the British and the Americans probably have quite a lot of guys still in the FSB. And not just
absolutely.
that, if you were, you know, a Martian looking at this thing from space and you see all these tanks surrounding a country, you would kind of figure there's a good chance there's going to be.
It's not really war games.
Right?
It's not war games. I mean, the build-up was radically different to what they've done. Even before Chechnya, it was something that was definitely on the cards. I think anyone with any military background would know that that's going to be the leading first thin edge of the wedge. So yeah, it was obvious they were going to go in. I just don't think anyone thought they'd have the balls to do it. But
well, you say it was obvious. Maybe it was obvious to you, but a lot of the world didn't think it was obvious. You know, they didn't see it coming, and they had to rush in a lot of stuff afterwards. And I remember the Iraq War. A lot of people didn't actually think that was going to happen either. You know, you were in the desert, but I remember thinking you wouldn't put all those billions of dollars of equipment all the way over in the Middle East and not use them, right?
That's right, exactly right. I mean, that's the whole thing. I think it was, I mean, first of all, to any Russian friends watching, как дела, привет, что ты делаешь, Putin, что ты делаешь, which means my Russian's pretty bad. But basically, what are you doing, Putin? Look, the whole thing is he should have learned from really the Chechen War, and this is, in a way, in a lot of sense, got a lot of issues regarding how Chechnya was handled as well. And you know, it's just, it was, Chechnya was a country of 1 million people and a very small army, and they took, you know, ages to, and they just bombarded like they always do with their military campaigns, bombard and just level everything. And here we got a country of 44 million people, a lot bigger, and a pretty good NATO-backed trained army over the last 3 years. So I don't know what he was thinking, but yeah, he went in, and we can continue on with what happened. Obviously, I think everyone thought that Russia would.
There's even some like Andrew Litvinenko, the late poisoned man in London, who said that Putin bombed apartment buildings to facilitate the Russian people starting that second Chechen war. But,
that's exactly, yeah.
But we'll leave that out for now. So, I mean, on the eve of the invasion, there was a lot of questions. And I mean, I don't think even the Ukrainians mobilized their National Guard until like the last day before, you know?
That's right.
They could have mobilized before that and probably got a bit of advantage from doing so.
Yeah, it's, yeah, you look at any military situation where you go into an invaded country, it's always, you haven't got the upper hand. The defenders are always, they fed in Stalingrad, I think, in the Second World War, which is was one of the most turning points of the Eastern Front. The Russians, held back and defeated the Germans, and it was a 5-month campaign. They were saying 3-1. You need 3-1 to go into a small arms combat in street fire and taking the streets. So, and now modern day, now you're going to need 5 or 6-1 to take something like Kiev, which is very well fortified with the river. Exactly.
Well, it depends. I guess it depends how much time they've got to fortify and set up, as well.
True, exactly. And there wasn't a lot. There was not a lot of time. I think now they've got 16 kilometers of trenches around the outside of Kiev. At the moment, we're fast forwarding a bit to the story I'm saying now, but they've got it all really well fortified, blown bridges up. They really have made that city pretty much a bit of a fortress. It's going to be not easy to take, and that's been proven that what happened, what transpired.
We're going back to the second day of the invasion. So we woke up with this image. And I mean, on the first day of the invasion, we'll say, the Russians made pretty good progress. I mean, they had crossed over from Crimea. They were obviously fighting for Kherson, I guess. And that was the first major city they were looking to take. And they were obviously starting to advance over to Mariupol in the east, which leads to Mariupol, obviously, and it links up with the Donbass. So the Southern Military District, their army, it's almost like we've got separate armies going on here. Nobody quite knows how connected these armies are and how well commanded, but the Southern Military Army seemed to have made good progress in the south.
It's interesting to see the ploy they took. Like I watched it unfold, and I'm a military buff. I love my military and also have some experience. But to me, to divide your force in enemy country is always an absolute no. You just do not. You go on one front. You don't try and take two or three fronts. You don't try and, even though they had the numbers, this just did from the very beginning lacks organisation.
You're commenting on the number of spearheads these guys have got going on.
So exactly. They came from the northeast and the south.
Yeah, the southern, we've got one over in Donetsk. We've got another one just north of that. We've got one over in Sumy. We've got one over in Kharkiv. What do you call it? Chernihiv,
yeah. Exactly, and the way this was implemented was not just bewildering and chaotic and confusing, but it really lacked a lot of organisation. I mean, look, we talked before, about one of the greatest of the 5th century minds of Sun Tzu, who wrote the book, the Art of War. He talks about that very same thing. You need to have, leadership, and you need to have management and control, and you need to know what your troops are doing. I don't think there was lacking here. It was lacking in so many areas.
So you think these guys were having trouble coordinating? The air power was getting competed between different spearheads, and logistics exactly right. Probably as well.
Well, the first thing you do is take out the air. I mean, what the Americans did in Iraq, which was very interesting, they went in and just got air superiority straight away, took all the air out, took all the airports out. So they had no problem from there. This did not happen in Ukraine. They literally, the Ukrainians have held back the air to a certain degree. They've really done quite well. And that we'll go into more detail about the hardware that's been supplied by NATO and by England and by the Americans. It helps to facilitate that. So, but
going back to the first day, Andy, the first thing we had was a massive battle over the Chernobyl power plant. So the minute the Russians crossed the border, they got themselves a huge battle over a radioactive wasteland.
Digging trenches in ground that they're now being radioactive infected, and they've now left. They've just, as of yesterday, they've now left the area and gone. Yeah, it's just crazy. Well, I think there was some sort of ploy there to back themselves up against something dangerous, and therefore they would be protected from any bombing or any sort of any drone.
I think the master plan here was they assumed that the Chernobyl wasteland might not be well defended. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, true. Absolutely.
Who wants to defend? Yeah. They were looking for the element of surprise, I guess, going through that.
And they're also looking at a pincer movement coming in from that sort of northwest, and then coming in from the east and coming in towards Kiev. Yeah, and it backfired. It totally
coming down here.
Yeah, it's I think when you look back to the Art of War, the book, I mean, this is a major program for West Point and Fort Bragg and Sandhurst officer training. You know that book. It's a 5th century, literally brilliant book on aspects of how to command forces in enemy territory. And one of the ones they really didn't understand and how to the chances of victory is one of the chapters and says, what are your chances of victory? I think Putin's very much his ego was his Achilles heel. He thought he'd go in, take Kyiv within 3 days. I think he was watching too much of America and Iraq and how quick that was taken.
Well, another indication that you're right is on the first day they dropped a bunch of Spetsnaz, airborne troops at the Hamel airport, and they obviously expected these. Now, airborne troops obviously don't have the heavy equipment to fight back a lot of tanks and artillery. They might be able to take out a few with some man pads, but they can't fight a heavy army. And they were obviously expecting the troops from Chernobyl to quickly get down to support these airborne troops, or you just wouldn't
That's
drop these guys
exactly.
there.
This is exactly. Look, this what they did in Second World War. They dropped the SAS version of the German troops into Greece to take Greece back. This when they lost a part of Greece, and this is a good tactic that works very well. These guys apparently, I don't know if you know, Andy, they're like nutcases supposedly, and no disrespect to anyone in Russia who's got a relative in this particular battalion, but these sort of Green Berets or these SAS guys they dropped in are actually, no one talks to them. They don't associate with anyone. They're like mercenaries, but they're fully equipped and employed by the Russian army, and they are crazy people. That they are given suicide missions. So that's the best they had at the time dropping in, and it still didn't, it didn't do the effect that it wanted. Yeah.
It looks like they did manage a small battle around Kyiv with their airborne and advanced units. I don't know, scouts or whatever. And they obviously tried to decapitate. They tried to take out Zelensky quickly, minimal force, while the main army was still trying to come down and reach them.
That's right. It was, exactly right. So it was trying to make a path in a sense to sort of stop some of the initial defense. But I mean, when we talk about that initial line coming in, it was forerun by the tanks, and I mean the landscape of tank warfare has changed radically since the Second World War, and even since the Vietnam War, because of the way we got anti-tank, hardware now. And that's, I think, a lot of the credit should go to the stuff from the England was supplying the NLAWs, as you probably can see. If we get one up on the screen, have a look at them in a minute. The NLAWs are an amazing shoulder weapon against tanks, reusable, very effective, but only at a range of, they're really only at a range of about 800 meters. And you've got to get line of sight.
They also have the javelin that goes out to
the javelin's changed this war. The javelin has literally changed everything. It's a one-shot, fire and forget, drop the whole thing. You don't reuse it. It just lays on the ground. They're not too heavy, and they are unbelievable. The way they work, and I must say, point out the Russians did tamper with their tanks, and we don't talk about the tanks. The T-14, the Armata, is a brilliant tank, but what the Russians have done is put an automatic cartridge system around it. They modified it so it's like
they're called cope cages. Yeah,
that's right, and it's a great effect. You can reload within about 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds. But the trouble is, if you get one of these the missiles, it's basically it's a thermobaric effect. So it blows the top where there's the least amount of protection, and what it does, it's an automatic can opener. It just opens these things, and that's where you see a lot of these Russian tanks with the whole top off upside down, showing the exposed underside of the cartridge. It was a stupid idea.
I'll tell you a funny story. I was chatting to my Russian friends now, and RT, the Russian media channel, they were actually commenting when the first batch of NLAWs came in that they were expired, and the British had given them their old NLAWs that no longer work. But by the time about the second or third day of the war came around, I made a comment back to them and I said, well, it looks like our expired NLAWs are making quick work of your expired T-72.
That's right.
Opening them up like tin cans, it seems.
Exactly. Well, they got the T-72s. They got 4,000. I mean, I think the Russian army's got 4,000 tanks on notice, and I don't know how many have lost in this battle so far. But the T-72s are a great tank. But the trouble is, now that the javelins came in, they were so effective over a distance. Well, they're $200,000 a pop. I mean, obviously, people are throwing them at them from every sort of available place you can get them. And I think they 2,000 meters. You can virtually not even have line of sight, and as long as you've got the laser-guided headset on, they are fire and forget and effective. They work so well, and you watch the footage you see of these Ukrainian soldiers. They only got one each, and that's one tank, which is worth 50 million, and 4 or 5 operatives. It's very effective. It's changed the whole.
Javelin is $150,000 for the command unit, and about every missile is about 120 or something $1,000. I think the NLAW's down to about $20,000. But the advantage is, although it doesn't fire so far, because every NLAW is a single unit, you can give it more troops.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. They're pretty light.
For 800 meters is probably where you would engage most tanks, because beyond 800 meters, you're almost talking beyond, or you need talking telescope distance, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I think there's 4,000 at the moment in the country of the javelin. So this is changing everything. I mean, like if they had those in the Second World War, the Panzer divisions would never have done the Battle of Bulge, wouldn't have gone across any of those. This is just so incredibly
Well, the
advanced.
problem might have been in that scenario that the Germans would have invented them first.
Yeah, that's right. Possibly. On that point, and we must take our hats off. The Germans are finally now committing. Well, we'll let the Alsatian off the leash, so to speak. The Germans have been able to sort of up the ante on their military campaign, which has not been effective at all, and haven't had any sort of military. But now I think Schultz has now acquired the right to do a $2 billion automatic spend on air and sea and army, as well as attributing 2%. Andy, to GDP towards building up their military, which I think at about time Germany really, instead of supplying stuff, actually built up their own
Well,
army.
the
Which I think
Germans apparently have supplied the Panzer III, which is the rocket, a rocket instead of an automatic missile manpad. It's a rocket manpad, but it's fairly effective. It's one of the best rocket manpads. Rocket firing systems out there. And they've also supplied some Strela missiles, which are like 1970 Soviet missiles they had kicking around from Eastern Germany.
It's interesting. It is. The Germans have now, I mean, they've realized this has shocked a lot of countries in NATO. This has actually rattled the cage now to a point where, they've now got to think about a lot about in their defensive nature of how they look after their own self as NATO. I think it's changed. The whole ballpark's changed after this a lot. It's
certainly.
Yeah, and get back to just with the javelins. I mean, I know that in Afghanistan they were used so well by the Mujahideen in against the Soviets in that particular campaign, which basically pushed and won that for the locals. And the Russians just didn't have a chance against the javelins. They've been really quite effective.
The stories were Russian helicopter pilots back in the day didn't even want to fly, but the javelins, 1970s technology
sorry,
now, but it's still quite effective.
Sorry, not the javelin. I apologise. I mean the
Sorry,
Stinger.
the Stinger missile you're talking about.
Yeah, Stinger missiles. Yeah, not the javelin. Javelins are a very recent invention, but yeah, the Stingers. They were so effective in that. In fact, I think at one point when the CIA were paying Osama bin Laden to fight the Soviets. They realised at one point he was a bit crazy. They're trying to take him out, so they end up. I think Clinton was in charge at the time, President Clinton, and they were firing stuff at MSS Missouri to try and take him out. And some of these rockets were landing in the mountains. He would get out in the pickup truck, pick them up, put them in the back of the truck, drive down to China 4 weeks later, and try and sell the nuclear warheads, the mini ones, to China. So it's all about the armory you got and how much power, and what they've got in Ukraine now with the Stingers and the Javelins and the NLAWs are just changing the whole landscape. It's really great, for a defensive country.
Apparently, though, Andrew, this column that was going down the pincer, the main pincer, was stopped by some drone enthusiasts who used drones to take out the lead vehicles and essentially stop the column for enough time.
And that's the TB2s you're talking about? Yeah.
I'm not sure what drones they used. I think they have various drones in Ukraine, but it may well have been the Turkish TB2s.
Yeah. The bayraktar is one of the most incredible latest inventions that's come out. And that's the story behind it is that America had the technology but weren't going to export those similar type drones to Turkey. The reason being they didn't want to get involved with unmanned attack drones to supply Turkey for their obviously causing problems and other issues in other countries. So one of the young guys who was in MIT, who was studying and became got a doctorate, came back to Turkey, a Turkish national, and he's the brainchild on developing the bayraktar TB2. He designed it and built it, and it's primarily a bypass way of getting your own, importing your own from America, and he actually designed them. But the bayraktar TB2 is changing everything, and that's been, I think there's about probably I think they've got about 250 at the moment in
I
Ukraine.
think it's less than that, I heard.
Is there? Yeah,
But
they bought 10. They bought 10. They actually been given about 100, I think, at the moment. But I could be wrong. But they're working so well to take out the air-to-ground forces, especially the tanks and the columns. It's just, I don't know who's. I mean, the Ukrainians are controlling them. Obviously, they've been trained up on them, but they are just such an amazing weapon. They really are.
well, I think what the bayraktar brought that NATO didn't readily have was a sort of middle ground drone, where we obviously have the Reaper and
Yeah.
Predator drones and things that fly with jet engines much higher and faster. But the TB is a sort of low flying, slow drone that the Russian missile systems, we maybe thought in NATO that these things would easily be dispatched by the might of the S-400s or any of the mobile defense systems the Russians are employing. But it seems like they are still flying to a greater extent, and they are causing a lot of damage.
They are. They're extremely effective, and I think when all the analysis comes out of what they're actually been doing, I think the TB2s will be probably paying the biggest damage to the Russian forces. That's what's going to be probably, and also the javelins. It's Ukraine are really in a very good situation where they are with Kyiv in terms of its borders and rivers and where they've blown the bridges. It's with that kind of natural fortress as well as what they've got. It's going to be very hard. I don't think Russia will not. I mean, obviously, I keep saying Russia, but it's really Putin's war. But they won't take Kiev. There's no way. I would put my house on. They will not get to Kiev. They're not going to take it.
Well, if we go back to the 1st of March.
Oh yeah, we're still going in time frame. Yeah,
they were still trying, certainly, and they had taken this roads near Kiev. They eventually took this other road down here.
Yeah.
And the other spearhead from the right-hand side of the country, from the Russian side, had come down, and it was attacking this place called Bovary that was just the right-hand side of Ukraine.
That's right.
And these were dark days for Ukraine. People, what you're saying today that you think Ukraine and Kiev can't be taken, a lot of people expected the Russian army, the second greatest army in the world, to be able to take Kiev. People thought its days were numbered at this point.
Well, it's interesting. You look at my view on the Russia's always been saber rattling. Really, it's a gas station with nuclear weapons. No disrespect, that is. I mean, I've always known the Russian army hasn't. In fact, 15 years ago under Boris Yeltsin, it was so run down. The ships, the armadas, the planes. It was really. It's always been a scary sort of Russia, nuclear. But when you look at their actual army, in the last 20 years, they haven't really been tested obviously like Vietnam, like America, and the NATO and Australia, as well as the Gulf War, the Persian stuff. And I think the problem is
they didn't have the experience. They were lacking experience.
They haven't. You look at 1992. They basically they had a lot of small wars against small countries. I think one of the jokes I make once is I think Lithuania had 120 wars against Russia and lost every one of them. And they kept saying, "Come on, guys, let's go to war with Russia again one more time." Imagine trying to rally your troops for Lithuania. But look, 1990, you had the Chechen War, which obviously went for 9 years. Even still, in the end, Putin took over as prime minister and then went back in 1999 and bombed the hell out of it again. Again, the same process. You bomb it, completely level it till there's nothing left. In fact, the rumor has it in the Chechen War, after Putin went in again in 1999, they took 9 years to sort of try and get the puppet government in. They actually sat in fold-out deck chairs, Andy, and sat down amongst the rubble, and that was the. But
that wasn't the story in Russia, and that wasn't the story that a lot of the Western analysts thought was going on. We thought that Putin had learned from Chechnya too. He had modernized his army. He had done a lot of damage in Syria, and he had a modernized army that knew how to exploit all these combined arms warfare and special operations.
Well, it's interesting. You look at the Chechen War. Then there was the Georgian War in 2008, and you had the Dagestan 2015-14. They took Crimea. This is against very weak and very small, and really most of the Crimea had dissidents of Russian wanting to be part of Russia anyway. There was a lot of social things going on there anyway. Then of course you had Syria, where they came in with chemical weapons, a punch from the back, not even leading, just hanging around the back doing, you know, nasty stuff like that. Not really a full-on ground war.
You think the Syrians were carrying out the heavy fighting?
Oh, not so much. I do agree that Russians were on the ground, but I don't think
They
that
weren't the
tested.
ones going in to take the cities.
Yeah, they were. And, you know, at this point, the Russian army hadn't been tested at any point. We've been going back to 1992. And before that, we got the Afghanistan war against Osama bin Laden the Mujahideen.
You mean
So,
the Soviet Afghan war? Yep.
yeah, the Soviet Afghan war, and they didn't even win that. So to me, they haven't had a good experience. A lot of their commanders now wouldn't even been in the last really serious Afghan-Soviet war. They would have only been taking part in these Dagestan, Crimea, and these small things. So to suddenly now be put on the world stage like this, and to come into a country that's got a lot of power, a lot of pride, a lot of courage, and I know a lot of Ukrainian people, and they're extremely strong. They're extremely strong people. So to do this now is quite an embarrassment for Putin. I think it's actually shown, in a way, the unsophisticated, but also
naivety,
inexperience of the commanders. Yeah, it's really shown the true colours. I think this is going to change the landscape again of the world powers and who is scared, because everyone said at one point, oh, Russia, wouldn't want to take Russia on, NATO wouldn't have a chance. Well, I think now Ukraine nearly is proved they can nearly hold them right out. So if America alone with Great Britain and France, I mean, there wouldn't be a chance for Russia on a land war to compete. But look, so they got one battleship, and America's got 19. Not battleship. They got one aircraft carrier. Sorry, America's it's got 19 battleships. Just that sort of scale of hardware. It's really hard to sort of see Russia now as a very scary threat.
The problem being is, I think obviously some in Russia realize a bit about what you're talking about, but they wouldn't admit it, obviously. But they tend to just drop back to the nuclear weapons. We've got the best.
That's
nuclear
exactly
weapons.
right. And they got the supersonic, which is really quite dangerous, because that comes out of the stratosphere and comes down within 30 seconds. You can't really protect. None of the systems can protect against that kind of. Plus, they've got the chemical warfare. There's a lot of stuff that obviously no one wants a third world war. No one wants to get involved, and NATO certainly aren't going to get involved with something that's it's not really any point in getting involved. But I think at the end of the day, Russia have now proven that really Putin has put himself into a corner. This is actually very dangerous for his future. He was obviously he was brought to great fame when he came in and got rid of the 7 oligarchs and moved all the money from private back into the state. The oil came back. He was loved, and the Russians loved what he did. And in a way, it was a very good thing, because the oligarchs were really controlling of Russia, and he was a great man at that time to change the whole corruption. But
if we go back to the 14th, though, Andrew, Putin was still going for legacy. He was believing he could be Putin the Great of Russia and Ukraine. The Russian army was making moves. It was surrounding Mariupol. Was attacking city of Mykolaiv, so it had taken Kherson, and it was pushing up to Mykolaiv so it could try and take Odessa and seal off the Black Sea, which would be a major blow to the Ukrainian economy. That means they'd lose all their sea transport and any sea trade without Russian, taxes or whatever Russia would do. And they were also really, advancing on Kiev as best they could.
I think at this stage, I think they took the airport Hostopol.
That's right.
They took that as well. Now they've just taken that back now, and they've abandoned it, supposedly regrouping, supposedly changing the attack. But we'll go into that more later. But yeah, this is interesting.
They'd taken the airport, and the Ukrainians were just
Hostopol
holding on to this town called Irpin.
Exactly.
The bulwark against them, basically shelling Kiev.
Yeah, that was within range of the howitzers. I mean, they got a 20-mile range. This is the problem. This is what Russia do every single time. They just bombard and just blow the city to pulp, hoping that the people will just go, we've had enough, and go, and then they bring in public government. It worked at Chechen. It took a long time with Chechen to do that. It's not going to work that way. It's not going to work on this
And we
blueprint
also
for
should
Ukraine.
remember Chechnya was only about 1.5 million population, whereas
Yeah,
Ukraine is
44
40
million.
million,
Yeah.
something like this.
Yeah, exactly right.
Down in the south, this city, Mykolaiv,
Yeah,
it was
Nicola, it was.
intensely fought over, and
Well, they're saying that
the
the
Ukrainians
fighting.
repulsed
Oh,
many Russian advances. Loads of Russian tanks and TOS systems were captured in Mykolaiv. I
in
think the
Nikolai
Ukrainians are
and
now going to award this city hero status.
Oh God, yeah, Nikolai and Mariupol. They're saying the Hollywood movies we made down the track of these two particular campaigns in the theatre of war. There's never been more bravery and more camaraderie between those particular two cities and holding back the major southern advance. And you look at the aerial drone photos and videos of Mariupol. It is just gut wrenching. I mean, literally it's like dropping atomic bomb over Nagasaki or Hiroshima. It's that bad. But this is the blueprint they use, and it's not working. It's not working. It's working, but it's not really working, if you know what I mean. Look at this. So this map's there showing us.
Seems like that week was a vital week for the Ukrainians, because if we go forward another week to the 21st, we can see that although they've obviously linked up down the south, they haven't made any advances past Mykolaiv. In fact, they've been cut back. And
that's right. And well, what we've got to play into this too and talk about is the morale and I think a famous, the guy that Vasily Vasily, I'm sorry I pronounced that wrong for my Russian friends and viewers, but Vasily Cherkov, a very famous commander of the 67 Division battalion that held off Stalingrad, said, and I'll just quote a famous quote from him, and this is something that should be remembered. In the fight of Stalingrad against the Germans, similar came in with all the power, all the might, and the Russians had one rifle between three men, one bullet between three men. It was an absolute nightmare, but they won in the end. And his quote was, the heavy casualties, the constant retreat, the shortage of food and ammunition, the difficulty of receiving reinforcements all had a very bad effect on morale, German morale, the Wehrmacht. And then many longed to get across the Volga to escape the hell of Stalingrad. So you look at that, this is kind of reverse imaging what's happening here. They're not being reinforced. And remember, a lot of this army, they're conscripts, and these kids are 19.
Not all of the Russian.
Not
there
all
are
of them.
conscripts in the Russian army, but there's also, I think the majority is professional.
Yeah, I think there's about a 70%. He's just called another lot of not just the Chechens that come and fight, but also Belarus went out like a revolving door. But now we've actually got another conscript, another 10 to 150,000 being called up at the moment, supposedly. Now that's what we're hearing from news reports, and there again, this is against the legislation of Russia. They're not supposed to conscript to the front lines on without basic training.
I think Putin even stated that there was no conscripts, and then they had to correct it later on.
Yeah, that's right. And these kids are scared, frightened. They're playing computer games, they're hacking, and suddenly not all of them, and they're going off the front line without any training.
You've got to also imagine the Ukrainian point of view. A lot of the Ukrainian fighters are new fighters. They just get a week or two experience. So it works both ways to a certain extent.
I think there's also an undercurrent of these mercenaries coming in from America and Canada and England, Great Britain. A lot, it's up to 25,000 ex-military, well-trained SAS gone in at 40-year-old men who are coming in, and I think a couple have been interviewed. They took out 16 tanks and 2 divisions, 17 of them, all American and Canadian. So there's a lot of people there doing stuff.
Famously, we have the world's most deadliest sniper from Canada, Wally.
Yes, Walid, yes.
He's made himself quite a bit of a target for the Russians.
So he's over
there.
He
does.
Yeah, I think he's got the longest confirmed hit ever kill. I mean, beats Carlos from Vietnam, who he's got the record of the most kills. Look, there's a lot of help. There's also a lot of hardware coming in. You got the TB2s. You got. Let's not overlook and shadow Volodymyr Zelensky. He has done an incredible job, from a comedian to an actor, to come in. What a figurehead. What a person to come in and just rally the country with incredible courage and bravery. And the way he's addressing all the parliaments of the world, he's really first and foremost, one of the reasons that the Ukrainian people have got so much courage. Yeah, incredible.
It's a good thing they picked someone that was so good with media.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Anyway, if we
job.
look at the 21st of March, Andrew, I mean, what do you think is happening here? This is the Russian forces not making much advancement. They're getting ground down, or they're grind. The combat strength is definitely being sapped at this point.
There's a lot of bridges here being taken out, main roads, highways. This doesn't go zoom down to Google Earth level to see what they're doing. The Ukrainians have done a very good job of taking a lot of the main access ways. The rivers are providing an incredible natural barrier. It's really hard. Like when you try and take someone, like even if you're not in a war campaign situation or small arms fight, but you go into maybe a paintball and you play a game called Ferret and Sniper, where the snipers at 16 people, the ferrets are 300. Those 60 people will take out most of those ferrets. It's very hard to attack something when you've got a prime position and you're hidden and you're in a position where you're well protected. When you're coming through the grass or coming through the streets like this, this is half the problem.
We've also got the Ukrainians are focusing on their supply lines, trying to hit the trucks with the fuel and the ammunition, because obviously the Russian army it's an aggressive army, a lot of guns in there, but those guns aren't much use if you don't have the ammo, you don't have the fuel, And
well, that's also self-sabotage. We're hearing that the young kids, the ones that conscript also, and the ones that are a bit, obviously have a connection with Ukraine, let's say, they're starting to sabotage their own trucks, taking the fuel out. They're apparently raiding chickens and farms for food. They've got no food. They've got no backup. They're just losing all they're not being. I mean, Napoleon had the exact same problem. He tried to take the Middle East. He just got to a point where they just had no food. They all froze. And he had to come back. He was going to take over the whole world pretty much, but he just got to the point where you're moving an army of that size. You need to feed them. You need to look after them. You need to have backup and artillery. And it just does not.
I mean, what do you think's happening with this large column sitting left of Kiev at the moment?
I think it's been pushed back. It's been pushed back by the Ukrainians a little bit, and I think also it's probably there's a small percentage of no interest and maybe just sitting there. It's hard to tell.
I mean, at this point, they've almost been sitting there for a month.
I know.
It's pretty cold. They're not making much progress. How do you think the Russian troops are feeling sitting in that pocket?
Oh, it'd be shocking. It'd be absolutely. You saw the major convoy coming in. It was like, I think 20 miles long. It was just sitting there. I think it's a combination of bad command management. Like you look at, apparently Russia have lost 9 of their leading generals, and this has never happened before in any sort of any.
I think one of the generals, Chechen general, actually made a move from Hostomel to Kiev with about 40 of his best Chechen tankers, but they were stopped with the Ukrainians, I believe, with javlin and NLAW missiles, and all killed.
So when you have the head of the snake gets cut off, a lot of these, and you've got so much split forces in a country and they're not communicating, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing half the time. And this is one of the biggest problems they're having now. They don't know what they're doing. They're now retreating back, or they're now supposedly backing off Kiev, but the rumor has it today they're going into a second regroup to take the Donbass area, which is, again, I don't understand. This is, from a military point of view, this is just a debacle. It does not make sense. I mean, the Donbass was always, it's always going to be, they've been occupying it now for 7 years or so anyway, and there's a lot of pro-Russia.
The whole of the... They occupy half the Luhansk, half Donetsk, and they're trying to obviously consolidate the whole region.
It's at this point, I'd say there's been a major miscalculation by Putin. I think he's not getting the same information back, because getting back to Stalingrad again, Hitler intervened with that and sent stuff through and said, do this, this, and this, not knowing what was on the ground, what was happening. So again, the generals are scared to feed back the truth to Putin, saying,
so you think the reason the Russian army is in this state on the 21st of March is because Putin is still his generals are still feeding them this complete victory. We're going to take the whole country. We just need a bit more time and resources, kind of deal.
I think that's definitely a fair degree of it. I think there's bad information flowing back. I think they're that is part of it, 100%. And also the fact they've lost a lot of serious heavy commanders. They've lost 7 of the best ever. One guy who spent most of his career in the Chechen and the Crimea, he's gone. He was one of the greatest generals. So we're now in a situation where they really haven't got great leadership. They're getting bad information from. They're not getting information from the other areas as much as they should be. This is probably what's happened.
And where they do surround a major city, Mariupol, they seem to be struggling to take this city. They're losing generals. They're losing troops.
Yeah, that particular, they was fighting the second week there. You can see, you can zoom in how big that city is. It's heroic what was going on there. They took the mayor. I don't think they've seen the mayor yet. He's been taken away when they first got in. But yeah, there was some serious resistance, and obviously, I think the Turkish stopped a couple of boats, the ships coming in, which also helped not having that sea protection.
The straits of
yeah,
that
they stopped them coming.
A previous campaign.
Yeah, that's right.
Down here.
That's right. It's when you look at when you look in the history of war, when you look at some of the great defences of military history over time, there's been a lot. There's either been decisive battles. There's also been wipeouts. But generally, when you have a defensive position that's been held, the famous ones you got like the Battle of Alamo that was eventually taken. You got the Siege of Jadotville in 1961, where the Irish troops held off the Catetains and the local Belgian and the mercenaries, and they held out and beat them under exceptional odds, incredibly brave, against air fire from the Belgian mercenaries as well. That was in Africa. That was an incredible thing. Of course, you had the Battle of Berlin, which 81,000 Russians killed, and that was the Battle of Berlin was again a pretty good defensive. They held out as long as they could. The Battle of Goose Green from the Falklands Wars, where the British landed at Goose Green, and the Argentinians held out for a long, long time against incredible firepower from the SA. Obviously the SAS.
That's an interesting point, Andrew, about Goose Green. Now, a lot of people say that Goose Green is a bit like the Mexican War. The Argentinians should have won it. They had the best position. They had more people. They had more firepower. But it is the will to fight, the belief in oneself.
That's exactly right. We had the best English
didn't think
paratroopers.
They could lose to a bunch of Argentinians.
The best paratroopers in British
knew they could lose.
Exactly. They dropped some of the best paratroopers in SAS in the whole of England, who are very experienced onto that Goose Green. They still had these cohorts of small Argentinians. They held back for an incredible amount of time. That was amazing. Of course, you got the very famous one that I'm extremely obsessed about, and that's the Zulu Wars of 1879. You got the Defence of Rorke's Drift, or the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where Queen Victoria awarded 11 Victoria Crosses for bravery in one 17-hour fight and conduct, where the second 24th...
But a lot of people would say that was to hide the arrogance of the main battle.
Of in San Luana, yeah. Well, for those views...
What we're seeing here is a little bit of Russian arrogance as to how well their special forces would perform and how well they could take these cities.
I agree. I mean, I think in years to come, this will go along the lines, if it's coming the way it's going, which they won't take Kiev, they might, if they end up just doing some kind of, well, now Zelensky is saying he will never give up, even the Donbass region, he will never succumb to any of this. So if that's the case, this could be a protracted, long affair for months to come before eventually.
Let's skip ahead forward to the current time and today, which is the 2nd of April. Yesterday, we just seen the liberation of Bucha, which is just to the right of Kiev.
And
so yesterday, it looks like the Russians picked up sticks and completely gave up on conquering Kiev.
The theory is they're just regrouping now. They're still
But
firing.
where
They're
are
still
they
firing.
regrouping? They're obviously not regrouping around Kiev, are they?
Back around the Donbass area and Donetsk. But the problem is, why go there anyway? They've got it under control to a certain degree. I don't understand why they can't
Okay,
come in from
so
that flank.
my theory is they have
Mm.
realized they do not have the strength to take Kiev. Now,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how well organized this retreat is. There's
Mm.
quite an opportunity for the Ukrainian forces to get ahead of them at some points
Yeah.
and take out a lot of their retreating units, which will probably be disorganized, right?
Oh God. Yeah.
Especially over on the right-hand side where they've got these two pincers that we were talking about previously that was trying to take Kiev. But now down in the Donbass, we've got an interesting situation. We've got Mariupol still holding out.
Yeah.
After all
It
this
is.
time. They must be low on ammo. They must be low on food,
Well,
everything, but they are
they're
still
trying to get
fighting.
a humanitarian corridors. At the moment, they've agreed. But what the Russian people watching, I understand, there is definitely evidence to suggest that when they do allow some portions of humanitarian, sorry, it's 1 a.m. here. Well, humanitarian evacuations. There's sometimes for some of the I don't know what patrols or what kind of battalions are opening fire on some of the fleeting civilians. That's been talked about. So if that's the case, it's war crimes for sure. But the trouble is that that's will come out more, and probably with phones and footage now we'll see more and more stuff happening. But if they can get most of the people out, I mean, I don't know, Mariupol they'll have to go in at some point in small arms fire and street to street, which is now pretty much rubble to rubble. I
Well,
don't
I
know.
imagine that's what they're doing now, but they're holding building by building. I don't know how many, and I don't know if they've got any anti-tank weapons left. They're probably having to destroy tanks with mortars, much like they did in Dunkirk.
Yeah, that's right.
But it will be a desperate struggle, but it does not look like the Russians are easily capturing it. It does not look like the Russians are particularly good at street fighting.
No, they're not. No, they're not. I mean, I saw some footage on the second day of the elite Russian troops coming into the outskirts of Kharkiv, and they were walking behind the tank like it was literally like Keystone Cops. It was like they weren't in formation, they weren't covering flanking, they weren't on point, they weren't doing anything in relation to what a normal soldier on foot patrol or when you go in behind an armored vehicle. It was like the Aussie SAS are some of the best in the world. They're pretty mongrels and pretty crazy, and what they did in Afghanistan is mind-blowing. I mean, we have some of the best. In fact, we're just supplying about 300 bush ranger vehicles to Ukraine. As of this week, Prime Minister Scott Morrison's announced the Bush Rangers, which is an incredible vehicle. They are four-wheel drive on steroids. They can move troops 8-10 really quickly. But I mean, this was just embarrassing. I saw on footage, and I thought this is the best of Russian SAS elite coming in, looking like just scared, worried. Yeah, it was.
Special
They were.
forces. I think
Yeah,
they're
they were
often
taken out.
often airborne units, special forces.
Yeah,
That's the Russian
yeah. Oh, that's true. I
friendly
mean,
term.
yeah, they're the ones they dropped into the exactly right. But these probably were more your marine versions. But it didn't look particularly professional, and they were taken out by the small amount of defenders in some of these outskirts of Kharkiv, and they were it was just, to me, that looked really really weird. Just didn't look right. I mean, they haven't had a lot of experience. I mean, look at these Chechen, Crimea, and Dagestan. There's not been really big campaigns or theatres of war to really the Russians to have a lot of experience in.
They
And so
haven't fought peer opponents
no.
who were able to counteract them with a serious military. So I just wanted to go on, right, and say what is happening now? What is the Russian strategy? Because they definitely seem to be retreating from the north of Ukraine. And in a sort of combination, there's this Donbass region where they've just taken a town after a huge battle where both sides lost a lot of people, called Izium. And it looks like they're trying to cut off a lot of, now I hear a lot of the experienced fighters that have been fighting since 2014 are down in this region holding the line on Donbass against the Russians and Luhansk. And it looks to me like the Russians are trying to get some encirclements going, like a bit of a pincer down this road, so that the Ukrainians are either trapped or have to give up all these towns and cities in this area.
Yeah, you could be right. I mean, Andy, that is probably the plan there, and that little area, that's accurate enough with what the occupation is. But again, it's only part of the Luhansk area, or is it Donetsk? I don't know. That would really not concern Zelensky. I mean, it concerns him, but I don't think it's going to really. It just makes that area a bit fatter. It doesn't actually give any sort of advantage to.
I
Kiev,
think the fight really is now over. How much of this area Ukraine can keep, and how much Russia is going to try and take.
I think my view, I think Putin wants to definitely. He will never ever succeed in taking Kiev. Now, he won't take the rest of Ukraine, but he may then look at this as a win for him, that he's taken that part, got the buffer there, and then.
Well, that's the game right now. So what can Russia? So Putin's in a situation where he has to sell whatever's happened, given the losses, given the cost, given all the tanks and aircraft he's lost.
Oh yeah.
That he's made some sort of success. Russia is now safer because this part of Ukraine is now denazified. They're not going to build nuclear weapons against it.
Yeah, I think that's his only. That's one option. That would be his own. But don't forget. I mean, he can hide all he wants, but when the 15,000 body bags are going back to mothers and fathers, and this cannot be hidden from the general public. When they've lost 15,000 as supposed troops so far, 15.
So remember the Vietnam. Put that in perspective, it was 15,000 they lost in 10 years in the Soviet-Afghan War.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that stat. But you know what I do know? That the Vietnam War, which raged for 12 years, which America pulled out in the fall of Saigon at the last moment, again, another incredible situation like this where America should have gone in and helped the South Vietnamese and take that pretty quickly, because it was like this. It wasn't a land grab. You couldn't tell how the war was progressing from land, because it was a hill 29, a hill 59. You take a hill, the next day the Viet Cong take it back, and then all there was the valleys and provinces that you took. So that was impossible. They didn't do it. Now look here. To me, it's like all he'll do is say that he's taken that much and pull away. That could be one option. But
I mean, the reasons have got to be, he's realized that he's going to have a hostile population if he goes into Western Ukraine. And is it going to be even worth the cost of the Russians occupying Western Ukraine if they're going to be losing men and tanks every month? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. You think about the Vietnam War, 12 years, the Americans lost 54,000 men, 54,000 in 13 years. They had, I think, 150 casualties, missing legs and arms or whatever. But
they barely lost a battle on the battlefield.
That's right. Now we have a situation here where Russia's lost nearly a third of what the Vietnam War was in how many days? 6 weeks? As well as most of their tanks. I mean, the air power, the MiGs, we haven't gone into the air support yet, but the Ukrainians have got the MiG-29s, the Su-27s. They've got old-style planes, but yet the Russians have got these new Su-30s, Su-33s, and Su-35s. But yet they're using third-class, third-party software for GPS. These planes haven't even got GPS put in them because they're so new. They weren't even expecting to be into a theatre of war so quickly. So they're flying. They haven't got any GPS or anything. This has been really poorly planned, really poorly handled. I think Putin's said his ego was bigger than what he realized what was going to happen, and he's not being fed the right information back. So this can only protract worse for Russia. I mean, for Putin, because I don't think they're going to take much more. I can't see, and with NATO now stepping it up and all these javelins and stingers coming in, and
what is getting worse for the Russians is now. Think about it. Ukraine is training, 10, 20,000 troops a week.
Yeah.
There's new weapon systems coming in. So recently, the Ukrainians in Mariupol, they made a video where they could not hit the Russian jets with the Stingers. So Boris Johnson has sent a new system called Starstreak, which is
Starstreak. I was going to mention Starstreak,
Italian missile, and it goes very much faster than the older.
It goes twice the speed of
Stingers.
sound. It is absolutely incredible. And you know what's interesting? The Stingers are very, very effective. They used them so well in the Soviet Afghanistan war, but they travel up to 15,000 feet. They can take planes or helicopters up to 12,000 feet, and their missile, their laser, their infrared heat seeking, they are very effective. But this the Streak is even another level again. So if that gets flown in the country, that'll give superiority
Well,
to a bit of.
the first helicopter, I think it was down here in Luhansk, was shot down by the Star Streak over here today, I believe.
Geez, there you go. So
So
they're
it's
in the
already in
country already.
combat.
Yeah,
But there's
and it's a
also the
very
S-300s they've got. We're giving them missiles for them from Germany. There are some systems the Ukrainians still have that can hit, a little bit longer range airplanes as well.
yeah.
And they're still competing for that airspace. Russia's not successfully taken out the S-300 systems. It's not successfully taken out the MiGs or the SUs. They're still operating these from roads, apparently. So if you see the pictures of where they don't operate from airstrips, they operate from farm roads and tracks to avoid, obviously, the Russians finding out where they are and destroying their aircraft.
And the Poles, I think the Poles just give them another, 15 MiGs from via, I think it was from America. They've just handed those over. I mean, having that extra air support will provide even more protection, but also be more damaging for what's really been the developments you've seen in the last 6 weeks, which haven't even had any total air support.
So the next question would be, given all these losses, so I don't know, T-90 tank, I think it's about 9 million. An Mi-14 helicopter, I think they're about 3 or 4 million. A MiG-29, you're talking about 4 million again. Some of the other systems, like the anti-radar systems, they can cost 4 or 5 million a piece. How long can Russia sustain its army with equipment and ammunition, financially and just practically and logistically?
Okay, my view on it is that Russia can't possibly, number one, with the amount of numbers they got in that moment, can take a city like Kyiv and then move on again, and then go, we're going to leave 1,000. You've got to leave 1,000 troops at each city to hold and retain it, while you've got insurgents coming in, a local population, Molotov cocktail, whatever. You've got to leave troops behind to go to the front. Then the front line moves on again. You leave more troops again. You find that already in the cities they've taken, especially in the not so much the Donbass, because that is already been under partial control. But the new cities they take, they've got to leave troops there. They're going to run out of troops. They're going to run out of conscripts. That's the numbers on the ground, on boots on the ground anyway. Let's move on to the other stuff. The harbor you talked about. You're
troops,
right.
There's just reports that they're running low on a lot of key munitions that they rely on, especially the more modern, sort of more accurate munitions.
Yeah, they're now that's the individual numbers of troops, and without troops you can't do anything. So that's a troop. From parking that to the side, you go into the hardware. They're running out of planes. They're running out of these tanks are being eaten up by the javelins. Some of their MiGs have been taken out by the new Starstreak as well as the Stingers. So this is now getting to a very dangerous position for Russia. Do they pull back and can see at this point take the Donbass and say, well, we achieved what we wanted, or does Putin have his ego so high he wants to keep going and going? Because this will be a protracted 4 or 5 more months. It will make Chechnya look like a joke.
Putin's willing to go as far as he can without losing. Without people conspiring against him, without the FSB taking him out. Because I feel like he sees this as, I don't know if he's dying or he's getting old, but I feel like he feels this is his legacy. He wants to be remembered. Do you know what I mean? He wants to
he's a patriot of the Soviet and of the old USSR. He definitely, I saw an interview once where he said, he was at a primary school, and they said to him, what's your greatest memory of your life? Or he said, and it was translated, he speaks English very well. He speaks English extremely well, but he said, I don't know about my greatest memory, but my worst ever memory was the day that the Russia became a federation. He's obsessed by this, bringing back the old Soviet, the old USSR. He wants that. I think he might even fall on his sword over it. Who knows? But I don't think he'll use nuclear weapons. I don't think he'll ever go to a nuclear stage or World War III. There's no way that will happen. But I certainly, you're right,
It doesn't make
Andy.
logical sense. Why nobody
No,
wants to? He's not suicidal, but he
no,
does want
no.
to bring that legacy of a great Russian conqueror leader. Like Stalin, like
Yeah.
Peter the Great, like
Yeah, exactly. Catherine,
Catherine. Yes.
yeah. I think you are right. You're dead right. He wants to leave something. I think he's now, 18 years as the president. It's now about time that he's on very dangerous ground, because we saw what happened with Russia, with the oligarchs and all the storming in the streets and the protests that happened when they got Boris Yeltsin had to sort of move away from that and push on to here's this young KGB guy, make him the prime minister. That was a massive movement in Russia with that. This saying that's tip of the iceberg. Once the Russians really know what's happening and people are dying and children are dying, kids are dying and their own countrymen are dying, then there may be a massive push. I'm not sure if the sanctions are working as well as the ruble's back up to what it was pre the war, but that's been propped by the government. They're propping that up, definitely.
Well, you now have to buy Russian gas and rubles and other things. They've come out with measures that are trying to prop it up and keep the Russian economy going.
I think he doesn't. You're right. If he doesn't watch his back and over his shoulder, there's a good chance that something may happen internally to move this. And that's something people say, nah, not going to happen. But he's getting more and more distant with the way he sits on tables. He doesn't have anyone around him. He's only got a couple of close people he can trust. Things are very interesting. This is hurting Russians big time. If he now talks about blocking off the gas for Germany, this is going to start a whole new another ball rolling. I mean, whether you like Trump or not, or you got your views about him, he apparently had a conversation with the German that stage.
Trump, whether you liked him or not, in retrospect, what he'd said about NATO and the German fuel dependency of Russia was objectively correct. It doesn't matter.
It's exactly right.
Or not.
And actually, he was spot on saying at a dinner party one night, I got on video saying to the guy, well, hang on, man, you're buying 80% of your gas from this to the German Minister of Trade. He said, you're buying 80% or 60% of your gas from Russia. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think this was 4 years ago. Do you think it's a good idea? Is that a good idea for you? He was paying out in a typical...
like the Germans were financing the Russian army better than their own army.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think they've now realised they were on the wrong side of the river, and they're panicking like crazy. But I think this has shifted the whole complete table now when it comes to trade and embargoes and what's happening, who's happening. Russia can only come out of this bad. I mean, and I feel sorry for the Russian people because they're great people. Most of them don't want this war. Most of them don't want anything to do with it. Putin is on his last legs. This will break him. This will be the end.
The problem is that although a lot of them probably wouldn't have chosen this war, once you're in a war, there's the whole rally around the flag. You got to be a good patriot and support your own country. So it's difficult. It's a difficult one for when you're in Russia. Where your loyalties lie.
Yeah, and of course, it's a country that has a lot of Russian connections and Ukrainian connections, and vice versa. Family and parents or whatever. It's more complicated than an ethnic, war where you got a religion or whatever. And that's where Hitler fell down. We talked about that briefly off camera, where Mein Kampf, my struggle. What an amazing! You look at his ideologies and what he wanted for Germany coming out of the First World War. It was crazy. I mean, he was so obsessed by anti-Semitic and militaristic viewpoints and anti-Judaism. He was obsessed by everything, and it just took a path that was just going to be self-destructive.
Well, if you listen to Putin and you listen to his speeches, he is denazifying Ukraine. He is stopping these Nazis that we have created. And there is some, they always point to the Azov battalion, and they show some images of some people in Ukraine supporting Nazis, and they try and say that this Nazi threat is widespread.
No, there's that extreme right wing in every country. We've got in Australia, we got through America, we got everywhere. I mean, England, Poland's a big one. I mean, it's always going to have those kind of factions. You can't stop that. He's using that as an excuse. I mean, there's no way. I mean,
The thing is, I would say,
Yeah.
in world opinion, is he winning the information war?
My opinion, absolutely not. He's not getting it. In fact, he's controlling the radio stations, controlling TV stations. He's now blocked Twitter. He's blocked Facebook. He's blocked
No,
all
but is he
TikTok.
controlling the information war in the world to start with?
In
the whole world, not just in Russia? And I would say definitely not. I would say
he's not.
Zelensky
No.
is far better on camera.
I know.
The
No, he's
Ukrainians,
not.
I don't know if all their videos, I suspect even some of the Ukrainian videos are, some of it's from a computer game or some of it is faked, but enough of it's real. And the Ukrainian information war has been spectacular. It's been helped by a lot of people in the West, but the only thing is, though, in Russia, they are trying to cut this information off. They don't want the Russians to see these same videos that we're watching. And they're trying to, I think the rumor is that they're going to shut down YouTube next week. And Russians have to use our YouTube, which is a Russian censored version.
Yeah, I agree. When you least expect a hero to come along, you get someone like Zelensky, who you would never in a million years expect him to step up to the plate like he has. Like the CIA tried to get him out, and the Americans about 4 or 5 weeks ago, like the Dalai Lama and all the overthrow of the Iranian government. The CIA have been trying to get all these fingers and pies. They try and get him out. He said, "No, I don't want to go. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying." And at that stage, he did that footage of the window of his building in Kiev, looking out the street, and came back to the office. And my heart went boom, boom. I thought, Russians are coming in. They're going to take over Kiev. I still have my doubts, but he is such a brave guy. If they go,
They were going to be fighting to put the flag just like they did on the Reichstag.
Yes,
no, they didn't get there.
No, that's right. And he's come out at a time where the country needs someone like him. He's passionate. He's good talker, a good communicator. He's an actor, comedian. He can think on his feet, but he's also rallying the country. And what a brave guy! I mean, I commend him. I think he's one of the things that Putin didn't expect. It's he'll probably get Man of the Year or Time Magazine Man of the Year when this all comes out. And I wouldn't go as far as the Nobel Peace Prize, but he'll be remembered as one of the great assets that this invasion had, and he's incredible. Yeah, he's just
great speaker.
He is.
Well, wow, Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure to hear your thoughts on this war and your insights. I hope we can get you on again and have another chat about some of what's coming out of Ukraine in the coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Andy, I can't thank enough. But you and I have a great history of passion for military, and we spend our days and months reading stuff like this, where we're not experts, but it's nice to talk about from our personal point of view what we think's happening. Let people of Russia, if they're watching this, see hear what's going on. And obviously, it's just such a thrill to be on today and have a chat to you about it. And I think all we can do is just hope and pray that that they hold out, and as long as they hold out, the tide will turn. It's doing that now slowly. Yeah, it's going to be.
Slava Ukraine.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Guys, let us know what you thought about our comments in the comments, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome.